So we are March 28th, and you know what happens in this country on April 28th. Canadians go to the polls in the federal election. And there is tremendous amount of focus on this, questions from you as far as the election issues, trade, tariffs. Those are issues that have dominated your questions, but housing, leaders and their private investments, so many questions. And as we've been telling you, CBC News has an entire fact-checking team. Jonathan Gatehouse, in our investigative unit, now sort of seconded to this and playing such an important role in all of this. I really appreciate your coming in.
Thanks,
we have viewer questions, and you've been looking into them. Ray McDonald leading us off with this. Pierre Poilievre said he sold all of his investments in American companies. Did he? He says he bought Canadian stocks. There was some mention that he brought into Brookfield, which has, of course, been something that Mark Carney's, there have been questions about Mark Carney in his time as running a couple of funds. So you've been looking into this, Jonathan.
Right. So the most recent asset disclosure we have from Pierre Poilievre to the Ethics Commissioner dates back to last summer. And in that disclosure, he said that he owned about a half dozen international index funds. He has since said that he's sold all of those funds and now all of his assets are invested in Canada. CBC News asked the Conservative Party about this and they provided us with a list. It's a pretty short list. It has 2 items on it. One is a Bitcoin fund and the other is an index fund that invests in Canada, which is run by a company named Vanguard. And there's a couple of interesting points about this. One is, as the viewer noted, this Vanguard fund actually holds a pretty big position in Brookfield, the company that Carney used to be chairman of the board for. It's its 5th largest position, 4.5%, which makes a certain amount of sense since Brookfield is such a big company and such a big part of the market. But it's also now a company that's a frequent target of Conservative and NDP attacks. The other point is that the Vanguard Fund invests only in Canada. It's run out of Toronto, but ultimately it's controlled by a U.S. firm and all the profits flow south of the border.
All right, thank you for that start, Ray. Eddie Thurston wondering about this. Conservatives say Mark Carney, again, this goes to personal investments. This is obviously on Canadians' minds. Conservatives say Carney should divest his assets now after a blind trust has been established. Does Mark Carney have any say now?
So the way a blind trust works is in the name. It's a blind trust. Someone else makes the decisions for the entire time that Mark Carney is in public life. Now, he is entitled to know the value of the trust. He's entitled to know, how much money he has, but not the exact details, and have any say in what is bought or sold. Obviously, he would have a good sense of what's in the trust right now because he just set it up. He just entered public life. But the larger question here surrounds potential conflicts of interests and the measures that are being taken to wall Carney off. He has a lot of stock options, we know, from his time on the board of Brookfield and on the board of another company, a company called Stripe, which is an American payment processing firm. Now, stock options come with a specific time frame, so they're not easy to dispose of. But Carney says that in conjunction with the Ethics Commissioner, he has set up screens. And so this will ensure that he's not involved in any decisions that might benefit these companies and thereby enrich his own trust.
So the personal holdings of the leaders very much on Canadians' minds, but we also have one more question from Mike Draper wondering about what we're talking about in the news this week, auto tariffs. How is Donald Trump able to bring in these auto tariffs? And the justification, or one of the reasons and rationales he's used for it, is a national security issue. What is a national security surrounding auto importation?
Yeah, so Trump hasn't talked much about this in public, but the official documents from the White House invoke Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. So that's a Cold War JFK-era act that was actually designed to cut tariffs and promote international trade. But it does provide the president with access to the levers to invoke tariffs if necessary when there's a threat to national security. So, does the importation of autos and auto parts constitute a national security threat? Well, the Department of Commerce in the U.S. is supposed to do an investigation. They haven't done one in this case before the tariffs come in. It's a lengthy process. It hasn't happened, but Trump is basing all of this on a report that he commissioned in 2019 during his first term. Now, he never made that report public while he was in power, but Joe Biden later did when he was president. And what it said was that auto parts and imports weaken the domestic sector to the point where they may impair national security. So a 6-year-old report with kind of an inconclusive conclusion, and that predates the renegotiation of NAFTA, which Trump, of course, hailed as a giant victory for the United States, all of which means we're likely to see a court challenge to these tariffs.
And this would be untested. So it would be interesting. Same kind of thinking that we've talked about as far as the fentanyl crisis and the illegal migrants crisis, the underpinning for those arguments all may be tested as well. Very interesting. Great to have you in this department. And we'll see you back on the program for sure. Jonathan Gatehouse on this campaign day 6. And again, thank you to everyone sending in the questions this time, Mike and Iddy and Ray as well. If you have questions that might merit some obviously very detailed investigation, you can send an email anytime to ask@cbc.ca.